WBNE.
Hello, and welcome to episode 141, all about the Silmarillion, Chapter 1 of the Beginning Days, being the 141st part of That's What I'm Tolkien About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, and right now I am reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. Today I am joined by Jude and Steffi of the Athrabeth podcast. Sorry, I can't read my own computer because I'm blind now. Welcome.
Hi, Mary Clay. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming on. Also, it's occurring to me now, or do you go by Steph or Steffi?
I go by Steph. Yeah, or whatever you call me.
Oh my God,
person,
I'm so sorry.
That girl, horse lady, whatever you want. I'm like it.
No,
Rohan
you go
fan.
by Steph because people get my name wrong all the time. And I wrote that down, and as I was saying it, I was like, I don't think that's right. That's
I like
100% my bad.
You're great.
Well, I'm joined by Steph.
Hi.
And Jude. So there we go.
Yay.
Would you guys like to tell me and the listeners a little bit about your experience with Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, and maybe how you got interested in it in the first place, and then what you guys do on your podcast?
I've been a sort of a lifelong Tolkien fan in a very casual manner. Reading The Lord of the Rings was sort of an annual vacation read for me. And then, gosh, a decade ago now, I stumbled across something called Signum University. It had a different name at the time, but now it's called Signum University, which is run by the Tolkien professor, Corey Olsen. Mm-hmm. And I went off the ding-dang deep end. I signed up for a whole bunch of classes and neglected my work and just did nothing but that for like 6 months. And it really exploded my interest in Tolkien in a whole new direction. And then I got married and had a kid, and my attempt to get a master's in Tolkien studies sort of derailed. But I have very much, my interest in Tolkien very much took an academic hard right, and that's where it's landed. So I've sort of found myself in the Tolkien academia circles of the community. And that's where I've really found my place. There's so much interesting scholarship being done. I had no idea before I found myself there how deep that pool is. There's so many smart, cool people doing such interesting writing and research about his stuff, and you don't realize how much stuff there is either. And it's just been a fantastic journey. And that was the point at which I reached out to Steph, because Steph was the biggest Lord of the Rings fan I knew other than myself. And I reached out and said, do you want to do this podcast with me and dive into all that weird elf nonsense that people don't know is out there?
Exactly. Well, so whilst Jude is our Tolkien scholar, I'm like our thirsty Tolkien casual fan on our podcast. So
love it.
You know, girl, we got it. It's a very thirsty book, I think, set of books. So yeah, I mean, I started like most people with The Hobbit when I was a little kid. My mom read it to me a chapter at a time. And then it honestly was not until like when Jude and I, we might be dating ourselves, but we knew each other from high school. And The Fellowship of the Ring came out when I was a senior in high school. And I saw it then and I was like, oh, look at all the cute boys. What's this book about? And that's how I got into it. That was the first time I read the main trilogy and kind of went on from there. And Jude asked me to do this podcast with him, and I literally ghosted him for a very long time because I was like, oh, maybe, cool. And then I never texted him back. And I think like a year passed, and finally was like, okay, seriously, do you want to do this? And Athrabeth was born. It was around, I think in 2018, maybe. And we just do one episode a month, and it comes out on the first Wednesday of every month. And it's the point of the podcast is a deep dive into the legendarium. So everything outside the main text as a way to introduce people, again, in a casual way like you do, but to the more obscure, weird stuff. Like, for example, the Athrabeth, like the name of our podcast, which is one of Tolkien's many weird essays about philosophical things that I don't really understand. But it's great. Jude leads me through all these things, and we've met so many wonderful people in the community like yourself, and like on Twitter and all kinds of great places. It's been awesome. So that's the
Steph's
story.
underselling herself as well. Over the last couple of years, Steph has really grown enormously in her scholarship. Half the episodes we do these days, Steph researches and outlines, and often she will dig up more obscure, weird papers and stuff. So don't let her pretend to be some completely silly casual fan that doesn't know anything. She's far more erudite than she lets on.
I'm just here for the hotties, Mary Clay. I'm just here for the hotties.
That's really great. Yeah, Steph, I think you and I are in a very similar boat where I mean, you started your podcast having a, foundation of knowing Lord of the Rings. I started knowing nothing. But we've probably gone on similar journeys of like, it started out with us not knowing as much about what we talk about, but now I'm like, no, I actually do know quite a bit.
Yeah.
However, in my case, I've actually now circled back to not knowing anything because I've like forgotten it all because it's been so long since I have read Lord of the Rings now. But yeah, it's really that's really great. And Jude, much like guiding Steph on your podcast, will be guiding us today. And Steph, you will probably also be helping me as well. Have you guys covered the Silmarillion on your podcast, or do you plan to?
Not chapter by chapter, but we very frequently dive into things in the Silmarillion. We tend to do like topic dives. We'll pick out something weird like what's up with elf souls, or where do elves come from, or what's up with death. That's weird.
Yeah. And we kind of go thematically that way.
Yeah. Or we also do lighter stuff. It's not all like, Middle Earth eschatology. Sometimes we also do who are the hottest horse boys in Middle Earth.
Yep.
We have a real range on our podcast.
Yeah, but we have never done the Silmarillion chapter by chapter like you're doing. And so it was really awesome, like, to get ready for this recording to, I didn't get through I've reread the Silmarillion, but I didn't reread the whole thing. But all the stuff around it to really go into this chapter in depth was very interesting. And it's interesting how Tolkien likes to like weave some very big concepts into like one obscure run-on sentence and then never mentions it again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's what we love him for, though, right? Like, that's why he's Tolkien. That's why he's our main dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is the first official chapter of the Silmarillion. This is chapter 1 of the beginning days. And much like the title says, it tells us a little bit about what happens on Arda after the Valar have come down here. We learned all about who these people are in the previous chapter, and many of them are, of course, key characters in this chapter as well. So it starts off with kind of detailing a little bit about this battle between Melkor and the rest of the Valar. And it gets down to Tulkas, the strong, ends it, basically. He comes down and immediately Melkor's like,
bye-bye.
I'm out. Bye.
Yeah. Elbow drops in from the outside and just ends things. I actually really enjoy that Tulkas in some of the I can't remember if it's I think it's in the Ainulindala where it says he comes in expressly because he wants to rumble with Melkor. Like he was not in Middle Earth to begin with, but he's like, "Oh, is there a fight?
Tag me in."
Yeah, somebody say a fight.
Beer.
Yeah, hold my beer, and he comes rumbling in like expressly to get down with Melkor. And I think that's a really interesting, because like all the other Valar have like a purpose, and Tulkas' purpose is to beef with Melkor.
Rude.
I think that's really funny.
Oh my gosh. And also like that whole first war is just like one sentence. Like there was a war, and like, okay, well that's it. I guess that's all we're getting. Thanks. It's crazy.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's like maybe, the entire thing, like from start to finish of like this battle happening and then Melkor running off with his tail tucked between his legs is like one paragraph.
What he chooses to focus on and not focus on is bewildering. It's real, like there are several examples in the Silmarillion of places where he does and does not give like detail. It's a thing.
Yeah, you'll see.
The places or the parts of this chapter that he has chosen to give more detail than others, given what like I know about his writing style and also like his life and his background and reading Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, it doesn't surprise me at all that like the things that he'll go into detail are like nature and beauty and like, did you know this thing has 3 names?
Yeah.
And in 3 different languages. And then he does kind of like glaze over these like violent battles and war. And he's like, yeah, there was a battle. Tulkas came and ended it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Move swiftly along, reader.
Yes. So it mentions that Melkor brooded in the outer darkness and his hate was given to Tulkas forever and ever.
Ooh, he's going in the burn book.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I need friend of the pod. Lauren does cosplay on
her.
TikTok.
She's amazing.
She has a TikTok where she's dressed as the Witch King, and it's to the Mean Girl sound of Regina George screaming and like running into her room and putting Katie in the burn book, except for it's like I think she's putting like Eowyn or something into the
great.
burn book as the Witch King. And so now I need her to be Melkor drawing and putting Tulkas in the burn book.
That's very good.
That's amazing.
Another thing of note is that everything, they're kind of starting from scratch down here. And so one of the things that they create let's see. Aule, Yavanna, and Varda make the lamps of the lamps of the Valar, and there are these 2 really tall, honestly I'm kind of just picturing like the Eye of Sauron tower from the movie, except for instead of with an evil eye it's like starlight.
It's like the pastel version. It's so nice. Yeah.
And it says 1 lamp they raised near to the north of Middle Earth, and it was named Iluin.
Yeah, Iluin, I think. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Iluin? Okay, great. Doing great. And the other was raised in the south, and it was named Ormal. And spoiler alert, but these get destroyed, I think, like on the next page.
Enjoy it while you
lamps.
can.
Do these lamps have any significance or connection to anything that we know from like Lord of the Rings?
No, I don't think so.
By
Judah's
1 degree of
making big eyes.
by 1 degree of separation.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was like, and these actually were the beginning locations of what are the 2 towers, not the book, and like one of them, but there's
right
again, it's been so long, I know nothing
for
again.
Sure. I think we're gonna
and one of them
find-
is good and one of them is bad, and so I was trying to remember. I was like, are these like, are these like the starting points, like
He does
locations?
He does love like the 2 towers motif, but no, these are totally separate. There's there is a
so
reference
there goes that theory.
That you'll get very shortly in the future. In a like I think 1 or 2 more chapters, you'll see where the ruin of the lamps becomes relevant. But otherwise, no, that's actually kind of a thing that people talk about, is like the lamps don't seem to matter that much.
Okay.
I mean, it's mostly just that was the first light, right? That they sort of had besides starlight. And there's a part somewhere in here it says that, because one is in the north and one is in the south, the area sort of at the center, at the middle earth, if you will, wink wink, is the most beautiful and verdant land, because that's where the 2 lights sort of intermingle, and that is kind of where we see things kind of start happening with the Valar who move down there. And I think the other important thing to remember is like the way that the land is formed right now gets really scrambled up, and we're going to see that later in this chapter. So like
right now it looks like a Target logo.
Yeah, right now it looks like a Target logo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a giant
There's
sea,
get behind.
and then a ring
There's a
of
big
land.
ring, and then there's an island
Big
in the middle,
lake.
and the island in the middle is where the Valar are, and all the land around, that's everything else. And the lamps are at the north and south of that ring. It's literally a Target logo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of
I'm very
interesting.
familiar with the Target logo, of course. Yes, it says, and thereupon the Isle of Almaren in the Great Lake was the first dwelling of the Valar. So yeah, this is a very special location. Also, this is where like there always comes, granted this is only like the third, reading I've done of the Silmarillion, but there definitely seems to be a pattern for me where I'm like, okay, I'm following, and then I'm like, and you lost me. And like, I definitely was starting to get a little cross-eyed when it was mentioning the building of the lamps, because now we're really building on things that were, taught to us in the previous sections, where it's like, okay, so I introduced all of these characters. You know who they are now, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like,
Yeah.
Aule, let's see, Yavanna planted the last seeds that she had long devised. Aule, at the prayer of Yavanna, wrought two mighty lamps. Then Varda filled the lamps, and Manwe hallowed them. And so I had to be like, okay, wait, who's Yavanna? Who's Aule? What does he do again? Okay, Varda, I think she has something with the stars. I don't know. And then Manwe, he's like the big guy, and like all of this stuff where I'm just like trying to keep track of it.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because he kind of does like a Valar roundup at the end of this chapter, but it's like, dude, it's already too late. You're killing me. And I think that's an important point too about this text, is that the Silmarillion, whilst it was always meant to be published together, the Ainulindale and the Valaquenta, and then two things at the end, were originally separate essays, right? So you would just start and have no idea who these people are.
Oh, geez.
Right? So at least,
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. Come on, Tolkien, you're killing us. Jeez.
Well, in fairness, it was not as though he prepared these for actual publication. These are like
that's true.
His 5 different drafts that his son and name went out of my head. Noted fantasy writer, mumble, name went out of my head here. Sort of squished together.
Guy K. His name was Guy K.
Thank you, Guy Gavriel K. Smushed together to make sense. So there's definitely I would hope, probably without justification, that Tolkien would have put some thought to a reader coming in with no context. But again, that is probably a hope without justification. Probably not something he would have done. But he didn't. This was not something that he sat down and was like, okay, this is ready to go.
Yeah.
This is like his son, who was Christopher Tolkien, is notoriously preservationist in method. He was never interested in adding his own stuff to it. Even when he was working with with Kay and creating the Silmarillion, which is arguably the most independent work that they did on it, they were very careful about not adding anything, just choosing which pieces to pick. They never independently created anything.
So it's still Tolkien's fault that we're all confused about the names. Don't worry. I'm with you, Mary Claire.
Yeah. That's so fun. Like, thank you for bringing that up, because I don't think I knew that. I definitely knew that Christopher Tolkien is the person we have to thank for this book that we're reading today. No, but like I knew that it was his, efforts basically that we have the Silmarillion. I did not know that the sections that come before this chapter were not like intentionally or originally like meant to be one piece. And so that's just so funny that like you would just come into this having no like zero, like extra zero knowledge. Like
it's crazy. Yeah, I think Tolkien would have wanted it all together. I think in the foreword, Christopher says something like, yeah, my father did intend that these all be one thing, but yeah, just like if you are picking them apart, this is very much like sort of leaving the reader immediately on a precipice of like, good luck with all these names that nobody can pronounce. Goodbye,
Yeah.
Very painful.
So now that the battle with Melkor has been resolved, there are all these states of peace. They have these 2 lamps that's made everything really beautiful. They have this the Isle of Almaran, I say
Almarin, I think.
Almarin.
Where everything's really cool. So Manwe decides that there's going to be a huge party.
Yeah, party time.
However, Aule and Tulkas are very weary. I don't know why it mentions that Aule is weary, like given what happened, because like Aule doesn't have anything to do with what happens next with Melkor, but Tulkas does. So whatever. But it mentions that Aule and Tulkas were very weary. And Melkor knew that they were having this party. He knows that these two guys are probably going to be down for the count and they're not going to be there to deal with him. So he kind of sneaks on over, and it says, now Melkor began delving and building of a vast fortress deep under earth, beneath dark mountains, where the beams of Iluin were cold and dim. That stronghold was named Autumno.
Mm-hmm. Autumno.
Great.
Yeah,
said
that sounded great.
Great. So he has built himself a little fort underground. He's made himself like a bat cave, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He totally has. Oh no, I never thought about that. That's amazing. I'm very happy right now.
Well, I was just thinking, because like there's all this stuff about like Melkor like living in the darkness or whatever, and like that's totally a Batman vibe of like, I was born in the darkness or whatever, like
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, he's so emo. I love it.
yeah. I also like right at the beginning of the chapter when it says that like Melkor ran away and he brooded. I love the word brood. It's just like so emphatic, I guess. I don't know. And so like, yeah, he's just so emo.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, wow, very sneaky of you, Melkor, that like he was like, I don't want to fight this guy again. I'm just gonna wait until he's napping, because it does mention Tulkas espoused Nessa, the sister of Orome. So they had a wedding, I guess, and then went to sleep. And so that's when he was like, now's the time. Let's act.
He's ready.
And build this fortress for me to go hide in.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm just going to hide here forever. He destroys the lights of Iluin and Ormal and cast down their pillars and broke their lamps. And I just had this image in my head of like a cat just like knocking a lamp off of a table or something,
That's perfect.
or a glass of water, just like staring you in the eye, just like.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so he breaks the lamps, and the shape of Arda and the symmetry of its waters in its lands were marred in that time. So the first designs of the Valar were never after restored.
I love that he's so casual about this reference. He's just like, yeah, so the shape is marred and yeah, moving on. I feel like he could maybe spend another sentence on the fact that like these lamps are like gigantic. They're huge. They're like mountain-sized tall lamps. And he just knocks them both over. And that's where the actual like shape of Middle-earth as we know it comes from, is he knocks these lamps down and the whole land just gets shattered. And what's left after these lamps come breaking down, all the Valar rush in and are like, whoop, gotta save this somehow, and just kind of shore up what's left. And there's Middle-earth. And this is one of these things where people talk about how like the Silmarillion is boring or kind of hard to get through, and it shouldn't be. Because man, that's dope.
Yeah, like
that's real dramatic.
That's some pretty exciting stuff right there.
But he's just like, and they knocked the lamps down. Moving on.
So dry.
Let's talk about the party they were having.
Right? Yeah.
Or
We're gonna talk about dancing.
Bummer about all those plants that didn't flower. It's like, buddy, I love you, but let's talk about some narrative momentum, my friend. But yeah, I think that's such a dramatic moment that he just talk about a missed opportunity, because it is.
And these are two important concepts that inform a lot of stuff later on. So that time of peace, he refers to it as like the Spring of Arda, right? And that is something that like that, and then when it all gets effed up, that's Arda marred, right? And Jude, maybe you can talk about this concept of Arda marred, because what I've learned on Athrabeth is that this is super important. But he doesn't talk about it.
Yeah, Arda marred is something that is we touch that in the Untitled. That's the idea that with his disruption of the music, Melkor disrupts how Arda should have been. Mm-hmm. He mars the natural progression of how Arda should have been. And the end of the Spring of Arda, that's a lot of repetitive phrases, is the first real evidence of that. Like the rumble that they have doesn't necessarily, they learn some interesting things. They make snow and whatever and what have you. But this is the first time where they have an original design for how the music told them to make the world. And Melkor kicks down their sandcastle, and now they can't do that. And this is the first evidence of Arda marred. And this is a a very complicated, not complicated so much as just like a fundamental concept, particularly with like Elven philosophy that comes up over and over again in the essays that Tolkien writes from the Elves' point of view. The Athrabeth, in particular, is very focused on this idea that Arda is fundamentally flawed because of Melkor's tampering. His marring is in the stuff of everything. There's a volume of the Histories of Middle-earth called Morgoth's Ring. And the idea is that Arda is Morgoth's ring. The way the ring, Sauron makes the ring, Morgoth makes Arda his ring. So this is the first real like evidence of that.
Yeah, and like while that's not that important at this moment in the book, it is just something to keep in mind kind of as you continue through, because we see that marring kind of how deep it goes and how it progresses, right? And how the ripple effects of it forever after. Yeah,
I agree. I think the way that it reshapes the face of Arda is a really dramatic statement about how thoroughly he's ruined their plans for what this world should have been.
Yeah. In one of the previous sections, we were kind of making fun of Melkor and the Ainur because it mentions that like whatever they built or whatever they did, Melkor would just destroy. And I was like, okay, but it says like, oh, they made a mountain and he crushed it into a valley, and they made a valley and he brought it up into a mountain. And I'm like, okay, well then we're still making mountains and valleys here, you know?
Yeah.
But like, so we were kind of making fun of that. But yeah, this is the first instance of Melkor like actually like actively destroying what they have created.
Yeah.
So he is able to get away though. And he goes and hides in Autumno and is like, Tulkas can't get me now.
Yeah.
Just try it, jerk.
Yeah, the Spring of Arda ends. Almorin was completely destroyed, so they departed from Middle-earth and went to the land of Aman, the westernmost of all lands upon the borders of the world. Yeah, so this is another case where they introduce a million names and places. And I was like, it's too many places. It's too many places. So its west shores looked upon the outer sea that is called by the elves Ekaya.
Completely unimportant term for you don't ever have to, you will never need that word. So you can just let it flit right out of your mind.
Goodbye.
Encircling the kingdom of Arda. Let's see. Beyond it are the walls of the night. The east shores of Aman were the uttermost end of the Belagair, the great sea of the west. Let's see. And then it says, upon the shores of the sea, they raised the Pelori, the mountains of Aman, highest upon earth, whose summit, and above all the mountains of the Pelori, was the height upon whose summit Manwë set his throne. And
this is a weird name.
Tanaquil, the elves, named that holy mountain, and Aulasi, everlasting whiteness, and Elrina, crowned with stars, and many names beside.
Yep.
The Sindar spoke of it in their later tongue as Aman Ulos, Welos.
That was good. Those names
just
are
like
really hard.
So many names were in places, and like some of those names are all for the same thing, and some of them are for like different things. So I'm just like, I don't know where we are. We're on a really tall mountain in the west.
Yeah.
Taniquetil is the tallest peak right within the Pelori Mountains. It has, I mean, I think what's interesting when he gives these names like Oilase, right, everlasting whiteness, or Elrina, covered with crowned in stars, or Aman Uilas, what we're getting is this idea that like there are, I don't know, to me, that part of what I love about Tolkien is that like his world feels really big, right? And so he gives us one name for something, but he also gives us 25 other names. And what that tells me as a reader without telling me explicitly is that like there are a lot of different cultures here that are just like myths that we have, like where so many different cultures in our own world have myths about the same kind of things. They have different names for the same things. That was also happening in his own mythos, and I think that's so cool. So even if you don't have to remember all those names at all, but just maybe we're internalizing that like, wow, this was an important mountain and everyone had their own name for it, and that is a cool thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like their new hangout spot because the old one got destroyed by Melkor. Thanks for that, dude. So behind the walls of the Pelori, the Valar established their domain in that region, which is called Valinor. So I had heard the name Valinor previously. I always thought it was like heaven. I mean, like, I think it's implied that like like this mountain is so tall and they're on top of the mountain that maybe it is in, the heavens possibly. But yeah, I was just imagining it as like a heavens type place and not like, oh no, it's like it's a literal physical place that they were in. So
isn't that interesting? Yeah.
You'll see why there is the way that the Lord of the Rings talks about Valinor, it very much does give you the impression that it's an otherworldly place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And it should be. And it is. And the more you read, further in the Silmarillion, you will discover why that is. But that's like internal history. You'll read why that becomes true of Valinor. Externally, Valinor is one of a series of places that Tolkien wrote about that were his stand-in for the traditional home of the fairy folk. Tolkien loved the fairies, and he always, in every version of everything he wrote about Middle-earth, going back to his very first efforts in like the early 20s or the early 10s, always had a connection back to these early fairy tales and these ideas of an other land. And so there was always a version of that. And Valinor is just sort of the last version, the last evolution of his concepts that very much moved away from the traditional concepts of fairy, but became his own thing. But they all retain that otherworldliness, that sort of liminal quality.
Very well said. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. In Valinor, it's really cool, basically, is a summary. And really nice. There are they have mansions and like beautiful, scenery and everything. It also mentions, okay, let's see, it says they sat silent upon their thrones of council in the
Fun fact.
Mahana Nexar, the Ring of Doom, near to the Golden Gates of Valmar.
The reason
was it like, what does that mean? What?
So the reason why that word sounds so left field compared to everything else is that word is in what's called Valinor, which is the language he created to be the language of the Valar, as opposed to Quenya. Everything else we've been reading so far is in Quenya, but he created a language that is specifically for the Valar, which is like every word is like 14 syllables long, and it's got a whole bunch of consonant clusters that the other languages don't have. Mm-hmm. And there are a few words in Quenya that are descended from Valinor, but that word that that's one.
I think it's Mahanaxar. Yeah.
Mahanaxar is a word that is just straight Valinor. And that's why it sounds like a mouthful of gravel as opposed to like the more liquid sounds of Quenya. Yeah.
Is Quenya like an elven language?
Quenya is one of the two elven languages. It is the older of the two. As the elven languages descended, Quenya became the primary tongue of the Noldorin elves, and then the Sindarin became the tongue of the gray elves. The rest, the elves. I'm trying to
lots of spoilers. Yeah, there's lots of elf families, and they all have different languages, right? Is basically
there's two main elf tongues, Quenya and Sindarin. In Lord of the Rings, almost everybody is speaking Sindarin. Quenya takes the form of like Elf Latin. It's what Aragorn is singing in the movies. Aragorn is singing in Quenya during his coronation, and it is primarily used as a language of academia by the Third Age.
Got it. Okay.
But the other part of this, like this ring, so the Mahanaxar, the Ring of Doom, and maybe Jude, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. But I think, Tolkien loves the word doom, right? He uses it all the time, and I think what he means here is doom is in the destiny, right? Rather than like your fate,
like prophecy
rather than
or
doom.
Destiny. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds really metal, but really it's more like, the Ring of Destiny. So I guess it's also kind of metal. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, it's where they were like, it's where they would set out judgment and discuss the fate of things. It wasn't where they like murdered people or anything like that.
Got it. So I saw Ring of Doom and I was like, wait a minute, we're not even there yet. I thought we were like, we're really far away.
Yeah.
Like I thought that doesn't even happen for like thousands and thousands of years. I was like, what?
Yeah.
The other thing of importance, and again, this is something where, that battle between Melkor and Tulkas was a paragraph. He dedicates like a full page to this section. Yavanna creates the 2 trees of Valinor, and basically they're really pretty, and they like the way that they bloom and die and bloom again is how time is invented. The end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Telperion over here, and Laurelin.
As a non-visual podcast, he's.
Oh yeah, I'm gesturing. I'm sorry. I have
so
our
the trees aren't like actually. I was imagining them like right next to each other. They're not like in the same place.
They are on a hill.
They're both growing out of the same mount, right? What is it called?
Yeah.
Zelahar, is that the name of it?
Zelahar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a green mound.
Yeah, I'm gesturing to the listeners. I'm gesturing to the Athrabeth logo, which is my background, which has Laurelin and Telperion.
Oh, I thought you were
me.
like, I see. Okay, well, I'm glad you guys came up for this chapter then. I totally meant to do that.
It's perfect.
Yeah, so these 2 trees, one has dark green leaves, shining silver, countless flowers, a dew of silver light, and the other bore leaves of a young green, like the new opened beach. Their edges were of glittering gold. And yeah, Telperion and Laurelin.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's noted that they have many names in different songs and whatnot, because of course, Tolkien can't, everything has to have a million names. Thankfully, he doesn't go into those names.
Can I just say one of the names for Laurelin is Alda, which I can only remember because it sounds like Alan Alda, and that's funny to me for some reason. So, yeah, there you go.
To me, it sounds like Maldonado's, which is a pizza place we used to go to when we were in high school.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, there's like a full paragraph describing like what they look like in detail and their names. And then describing like, okay, every 7 hours, this tree would start to die. And then like 2 hours later, this one's, and like all this stuff. Long story short, this is how they mark the start and ends of their days. When one of them starts blooming. Let's see, it says each day of the Valar and Aman contained 12 hours and ended with the second mingling of the lights, in which Laurelin was waning, but Telperion was waxing. Thus the days of the bliss of Valinor, and thus began also the count of time. And I was like, wow, thank you, Tolkien. I was definitely like really wondering, like, what about time? How does time, how does like the day work here? That was something that like, until he started describing it, I was like, I just,
yeah.
And like, it seems to operate under a similar system, I guess, of hours of like Laurelin is blooming maybe at midnight and Telperion is blooming at noon,
Yeah.
So like that, I was not questioning how time functions at all, but Tolkien made sure to explain it anyway.
It's interesting. The one thing that they say a little earlier in the chapter about those lamps that we first heard about, the first light that came, is that they were like the term is like an unceaseless day. So there was no sort of nighttime when the lamps were there. So this, I guess, was kind of the first time they had like a nighttime, which I think is kind of interesting, right?
And it's also interesting. I think this is an interesting chapter because this is a chapter. The Silmarillion is a work that is not really, I don't think it really is appreciated in the first time that you read it, because it's very much a work where Tolkien was working out all these myths and stories, and he didn't write it linearly. So he would write something and then go back and build up the foundation for it. So for example, the Count of Time thing, that seems like kind of a weird throwaway thing, but how time worked was of an enormous concern for him. He went back in the most recent volume that was published, that was edited by Carl Hostetter. He published like pages and pages of notes of Tolkien's about how time was counted, like calculating the ages of the lamps and the trees and so on and so forth, and how like all of Tolkien's thoughts on how this worked. So it's one of these things where it seems like a trivial, there's a lot of things I think is what I'm getting at, especially in this chapter, that seem like very weird, trivial references to get like, why does he care about this? Why does he care about the trees so much? Why is he focusing on these trees so much? That as you read, once you've read the Silmarillion and then you come back and read it again, you get why, because there are things in the Silmarillion that are enormously important, but the only way he's not really telling you that they're important except by the word count. Now, that's not consistent, because there are things that are very important here that he's just going to be like, oh, when this happened.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
But there are a lot of these things that he devotes a lot of words to. He does so because they're going to have a weight, a narrative weight down the chapters. And for example, the count of time and the trees are two of them.
Yeah, I think too, like the whole time thing is interesting because right now, like the Valar are the only one, the Valar and the Maya, right, are sort of the only ones, and animals, I guess, are on the earth, right? There are timeless beings. Then the elves come in and they're also sort of timeless beings, right? And so this idea of time is maybe not, I don't know, I'm just kind of working this out in my head right now, but like maybe it's not as important to timeless beings, but it is important.
It's an interesting point I hadn't considered. Like, who gives a shit about time until much
yeah.
later
timeless,
on?
Who cares, right? But I mean, here's the thing, like then we get the last babies, the men, and time is real important to us, right? Because we have such a limited amount of it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but I just think it's kind of cool that it's in
No, it's an interesting point.
It's in here. Yeah.
I also think one of my favorite parts about this section is Nienna's inclusion in the creation of the trees. I have a particular fixation on Nienna. I actually have her tattooed on my shoulder over here.
So Nienna is, tell them who she is. Just remind us.
Nienna is one of the Valar. She is acquainted with grief, is how Tolkien describes her. She's one of the sort of the higher order of the Valar. And her whole deal is she remembers all of the torments and griefs of the world and grieves for them. But she also, those who hearken to her learn endurance and wisdom, is kind of how he puts it. Mm-hmm. And compassion. I think she's just an enormously interesting character. She gets a lot more, she has like 3 lines in the Silmarillion, but in some of the other writings he's done, she gets more writing. But I think she's just a super, super interesting character.
But here it's like she's the one who like waters them, right? Is that what she does?
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering about that because it says it really focuses on Yavanna like growing these trees, and then it says Nienna thought in silence and watered the mold, and not mold like the thing that kills you. Yeah. Like whatever. Anyway. Nienna thought in silence and watered the mold with tears. So I guess it's just now occurring to me. I was like confused by her. I was like, well, wait, why was Nienna mentioned here if Yavanna is the one who grew them, but she watered them? Yeah. Okay, got it.
And specifically her whole thing is she remembers, that might be spoilers, so maybe I won't. I don't want to get, it's like one line. The watering is not what's important. It's okay.
It's her presence there. Is that what's important?
Well, it's
she has involvement.
It's why
she's around.
Yeah, I would say it's not just that it's not water she's contributing to the trees.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Tears.
It's
Got
tears.
It.
Another thing I wanted to mention, one of my favorite bits here, is it mentioned, is tuna mentioned in this section, or is that later?
No, it's later.
Damn.
Nope.
Tolkien's complete disregard for what things may or may not sound like in the real world is like, look, I don't make the rules. This is what Quenya says this word should be.
Like Malinalda. It sounds silly.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, if I make up a word and the word is tuna, and that happens to be a super important word.
Yeah. So I've been playing The Witcher 3 recently, and there is a character named Dudu. Dudu.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not just like a passing by character. Like it's someone who, like depending on like where you are, in the story, that they mention a lot. Like every character is saying doo-doo, and I'm like,
could you not have localized that a little bit differently?
Right.
Yeah.
How do we? That is what's tricky, because originally, it was like The Witcher was originally written in Polish. So that was possibly something that was lost in translation.
Apparently that author is similar to Tolkien in that he's very intense about like the naming that he does. So I imagine that's one of those things where he was just like, no, I'd rather leave it like doo-doo. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, like I was just like, what is happening here?
Never said doo-doo so much in my
Yeah,
life.
with Tolkien, he just didn't care when Quenya churned out words that were a little bit weird, like in English sounded like, tuna.
Like a
He
tuna
was like,
fish
well,
sandwich, yeah.
what are you going to do?
Then we start learning more about okay, basically I think it comes down to this. There was a lot of words for what I think it came down to explaining that. Okay, so there are the Noldor. Is that a kind of elf?
That is one of the tribes of elves, yes.
Great. Okay. So I think I've got this straight. It says that Aule is the Noldor elves' favorite guy, and he's their friend, their buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is the Vanyar.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the Vanyar.
And they love Manwë. He's their fave.
Yep.
And then who's the other one? Sorry. Comparing my
the Teleri.
Teleri love Olmo.
Yep.
And Olmo is their fave.
Yep.
And that was like a page that I just summarized.
Exactly, because you sort of already met these Valar in the Valaquenta, right? So it's a little bit of like, okay, we already know this stuff.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, because it mentions that Aule is like working hard. There's a TikTok. I don't know if you guys are on TikTok, but there's a sound that's like, I work hard to make this house a home. And that just seems like Aule to be of like, he's working hard to make this land a home for, the children of Iluvatar. And creating it.
Yeah, they're the hard workers.
They are. And this paragraph or whatever, this few sentences about Aule is so important because he just, again, Tolkien offhand goes like, oh yeah, the Noldor, they also made the first gems. And the fairest of all these gems.
I noticed that too. Yeah, it says the Noldor also, it was who first achieved the making of gems. And the fairest of all gems were the Silmarils, and they are lost.
Right?
I've heard the Silmaril, like I've heard that before, and I think someone has probably like told me about it previously. I don't remember too much, but I was like, wait a minute, hang on. Also, like the name of this book is the Silmarillion.
Right.
Like that seems kind of major to me.
Right. But
like,
again, it's all foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like we won't even talk about it now because this is what this whole like what's this part called? Sorry, the Quenta Silmarillion, right? This is a story of the stupid Silmarils. But I just love that it's just like, oh, it's just pepper dropped in here, and then don't worry about it for a few chapters. It's fine. Oh,
like
Tolkien.
They're lost. They're gone. We don't know where they went.
Is it a spoiler to translate Quenta Silmarillion?
You can say it.
Yeah, it's the history of the Silmaril.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this whole like next fleet of chapters are like about these stupid gems, and we already know, so it's sort of spoiler, but which are lost, right? But it's like the unfolding insane story of what happens and the insane ripple effects that come from this and people's dumb choices that I can't wait for it to listen to your, following episodes. I can't wait
I'm very excited to hear you get to the chat to. Never mind. Just gonna let it slide.
Don't worry about it. But you have a awesome like mountain of.
You have a ride ahead of you. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, but again, it's just like hinted at here in this like weird Aule section. It's so weird. Oh, Tolkien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Also of note, the Vanyar love Manwë because of like song and poetry. So they kind of seem to me
they fancy.
to be. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the higher up elves, I guess. Of like regalness of like we're like refined culture people.
They're like pinky up teacup people. Hey. Yeah. I love in the Manwë section too. Doesn't it say something about how like eagles and hawks like give him messages? They're like, hey Manwë, pss, pss, pss. They're like early Twitter for him. Like eagles.
Yeah, and also I was like, eagles, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Wink, wink.
Like eagles.
I know.
And I was like, no, they were.
Yep.
At this point, they're probably just like, now they're just like birds.
They're just
but like
birds.
Let's see. Yeah, Olmo does not, because we'll remember from the previous chapter, Olmo lives alone. He's a loner dude, but he's happy. He's a bachelor. He's not a loner.
Yeah.
He's a bachelor. He likes his own space,
Almost one of my other favorite Valar. I love Olmo. I think he's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead. Sorry, Jude. I was just stepped on you.
I appreciate very much that he has a real love of Middle Earth. I think he has a lot of integrity and dignity. And a lot of the Valar come across as just sort of like snooty god archetypes. And Ulmo has a lot more dimension and character. I also really like Asa and Weenan. I think they're really interesting little gods. Like, you've got one who's just like the guy all sailors are afraid of. And then his wife, who all sailors pray to be like, please restrain your husband so we can get home.
Yeah.
That feels very lived in.
Yeah.
That detail.
Yeah, Ulmo is great. I mean, I think, Jude, what you're like getting to, there's that line, something like he never forsook Middle Earth, right? Like, even when Middle Earth was all broken and busted and all the Valar were like, goodbye, we're going to go live in Valinor alone, bye-bye, nobody gets in. He is one of the only two that still, like, goes back and, like, cares for it until the end of days. Like, I love that. That's very beautiful and sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, it says, and thus it was by the power of Ulmo that even under the darkness of Melkor, life coursed still through many secret lodes, and the earth did not die. So he's like, everyone's abandoned, they left because Melkor ruined the party, and almost like, we can't just give up on this place. Like, I'll chill down here. I'll make sure, like, it's taken care of, I guess. Y'all have fun up there, whatever.
Yeah.
I also really love that it said, and I have literally no idea where this is said, but it's not really a spoiler, that the last echo of the music is preserved in the sound of water.
Yeah, I think that's in the Ainulindale or something, right? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And I really love that. And I think that says a lot about the character of Ulmo, that he is the Lord of Waters, and that's his domain, and that he has sort of, that he's immersed in that echo of the music. I think that it has to inform his character.
Yep. I think so the dovetail of this is like Yavanna, the next paragraph is like the other Valar who does not abandon us, basically, right? She's the next, she still comes back. It's her and Ulmo, and she comes back and like cares for the hurts of Melkor, whatever it is, whatever it says. That's lovely.
Yeah, therefore, leaving the house of Aule and the flowering meads of Valinor, she would come at times and heal the hurts of Melkor. And then Orome, tamer of beasts, would also come every now and then. And he would, pursuing to the death the monsters and fell creatures of the kingdom of Melkor. Yeah, basically, it seemed to me that like these are the Valar that are like committed to keeping this place, keeping Middle Earth, like we've mentioned, alive still for the children of Iluvatar. And then there are those other guys up in Valinor, what did I just say? Valinor, who seem to be oblivious, because like Melkor is still down here, because it mentions, that he's still, that like he has these monsters and creatures that Orome has to like fend off and fight against. And it says, but even as Orome passed, the servants of Melkor would gather again, and the lands were filled with shadows and deceit. So definitely like a lot of like, despite like what Ulmo and Yavanna and Orome and some of the other guys are doing, there's still something darker coming, something in the distance that despite what they are doing, despite these like gods' efforts, Melkor has something scheming in the back of his head.
Yeah,
despite their best efforts, Melkor outclasses all of them by a couple orders of magnitude. He was the greatest of all of them. He's this, Lucifer Morningstar figure, and they can't compete with him individually. And that's kind of a recurring theme that you'll see over the course of the Silmarillion, is this idea that they can't, it takes all of them to step to Melkor.
So the last major thing that happens in this chapter is that we finally get to see who are these children. We've been hearing a lot about the children of Iluvatar. And so first we learn about the elves. And I love this note. It says, if ever in their dealings with elves and men, the Ainur have endeavored to force them when they would not be guided, seldom has this turned to good, howsoever good the intent.
Yep.
So I love the idea that like the children of Iluvatar are down here and they can do their own thing. And the Valar and the Ainur, I guess, they have this vision and this understanding of what Iluvatar wanted. But like, it's very much like a metaphor of like, a parent and a child, of like, you can want your kid to like do the best thing, but if you force them to do it or whatever, it's never going to end up well. And so like they still have this kind of like aspect of like free will to like figure things out for themselves, whether that goes like, you know, good or bad for them.
Yeah.
You know, we'll see.
Yeah, some good foreshadowing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the children are from the third theme, which the Ainur have no knowledge of. They were not a part of the third theme. So anytime they try and tinker in that, it goes badly.
Yeah, very badly.
There are elves, which we know are, you know, immortal essentially, but the men he gives the gift of men, basically just saying like, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because Steph has serious beef with the idea of death being a gift.
So yeah, I'm with you. I was like,
you.
what is this gift? And I guess it's like,
I'm rolling my sleeves up for this topic.
Like I can see how like immortality is that they both have their pros and cons, you know, like immortality, that's great, but also it's like, wow, that's what, like, have y'all lived life? It's exhausting,
right?
Like
We've all
I
read
don't want to
Tuck
do that
Everlasting.
forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the reason why it's a gift is because elves are not truly immortal. They are immortal within the bounds of Middle-earth. So when Middle-earth ends, and Middle-earth is not eternal. It has a distinct ending point. The song had an ending. When Middle-earth ends and the song ends, elves will disappear. And there is no conception of afterlife for the elves.
Right.
They will vanish. Their role is to be within Middle-earth. They have no conception of an existence outside of Middle-earth. The gift of men is to leave Middle-earth and return to Eru at the end of after their lives and have an existence outside of Middle-earth afterward. That's the gift.
Yeah.
The gift is that they don't vanish into nothingness at the end of the run of Middle-earth.
Right. And so like this is really a theological concept, right? That Tolkien is introducing here. This idea of like the everlasting, like the afterlife versus like this idea of the unknown. So yeah, so okay, so I get it. And there's also a line
and in
here.
fairness, he's not introducing, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
In fairness, he's not introducing any of this here. I'm giving you a wider context that is not introduced anywhere in the Silmarillion. Like this is all stuff that is introduced like outside in his essays and like this is stuff that is just like hinted at a little bit in the Silmarillion, a little bit, but like he doesn't really touch on the gift a whole lot, like the full, especially the idea of the nature of elven immortality is something that he, towards the end of his life, he gave a lot of thought to, and he was writing multiple essays about the nature of elven immortality. I have like 3 different books on my shelf with essays about it or collections of essays about his thoughts on the subject. So like he gets really into it, but like at the time where he was writing what was published as a Silmarillion, he wasn't as concerned about this topic as he would be later on.
And I think too, there's a really important little couple of sentences in here that if I had like that has changed my beef with it, because I used to have this beef and now I sort of get it, but in this chapter, sort of at the end, what it says is Melkor cast his shadow upon this gift, right, upon the idea of death, and he confounded it with darkness and brought forth evil out of good and fear out of hope. So I think like the idea of death is not supposed to be a scary thing. Melkor's the one who made us think it's scary and made us fear it.
Yeah.
And I think that is so vital, right? Because otherwise, how does it doesn't feel like a gift if we think it's evil, but it does if it means we're like going to get closer to Eru or whatever it is that comes afterwards, right? So I think that's important to kind of remember. And I think that is a nuance that I missed the first time I read it. And I was just like, what? That's not a gift. That's lame. I want to live forever. This is stupid. Stupid Tolkien. I'm sick of this guy. And so what is it? I can't remember what men are called. Doesn't it say they're called?
Atani.
Oh, no, but I mean, I think they have like a special nickname, like the guests, the after.
Guests, the aftercomers.
Oh, yeah.
They get a lot of really backhanded compliment names from the elves.
I love this part. It says, yet the elves believe that men are often a grief to Manwë, who knows most of the mind of Iluvatar. For it seems to the elves that men resemble Melkor most of all the Ainur, although he has ever feared and hated them, even those that served him. So the elves are just like, ugh, men, am I right?
Yeah. This is one of those lines where it really does emphasize that the Silmarillion is an elven document. It was written by elves. And this is where you can really see that it's like, oh, okay, right. Snarking about men. Got it.
Yeah. And I think that what it means here, when they say that it's kind of like that men are similar to Melkor, I don't think it necessarily means that they're evil, but that it means that Melkor, was never content to do what he was told, or like to stay within the music that was already there. He was adventurous, and he wanted to do his own thing, and he wanted to strike out. And part of the gift that was given to men that really wasn't given to elves is free will, right? So elves very much have this like fate, right? They're all about fate and destiny and blah blah blah. And men are like these wild cards that are given free will, and they can make their own future, and they can do whatever they want. And so they're kind of like, I don't know, to an elf, I'd be like, get away from me, you weird little newcomer. Like,
yeah,
away, go.
Yeah. All the children, the whole concept of like fate versus free will is a really, really interesting one. And the idea of how much free will do the elves have versus the men have is a super cool topic. But yeah, that's a really interesting point. Like, how much do men have more free will than elves? And is that a Melkorish trait that they're referring to there? I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The men are also called the strangers.
Ooh.
That's what I mean
name.
about
or the strangers.
backhanded compliments, because then they explain it and they're like, oh no, but we mean it in a good way. Like, it's not an insult when we call you like the rude interrupting butts. Like, it's complimentary.
We mean
really
it.
And then we end the chapter on this kind of like a little bit of like a foreboding note. Yet of old the Valar declared to the elves in Valinor that men shall join in the second music of the Ainur, whereas Iluvatar has not revealed what he purposes for the elves after the world's end, and Melkor has not discovered it.
Yeah.
So like, ooh, mystery.
Yeah.
What do the elves do?
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of touching back on what I was talking about before with the elves being immortal, co-immortal. I can't remember exactly the phrase he uses, but immortal along with Middle Earth. Like, humans get to ride along into whatever comes after Middle Earth, but elves,
Right.
no.
Yeah. And Melkor and all of his like misplaced wisdom doesn't even know, right? He has no idea, because none of them know the true like mind of Eru, right? And what Eru really wants. It kind of just it's like, and Melkor hasn't discovered it. Goodbye. Like it doesn't feel like an end. It's like, oh, okay, well, we're done. Oh, okay, thanks.
I guess it's like, okay, more on that later.
Right?
I guess,
Yeah, he's got he has such an not unusual, but he has such a particular mode, I guess is the way I want to put it, of writing. You can tell who he's trying to emulate. He's trying to write in this mythic, in this epic style. But also I think there are places where some of these chapters feel unfinished, where they feel abrupt. And this is one of those ones where it's just like, whoop, and you just bonk into the end of the chapter, and that's the end of it. I feel like if he had, had he been forced to publish it the way he was forced to publish The Lord of the Rings, I suspect he would have actually wrapped up that chapter in a slightly more elegant fashion. But
That's a great point.
Because Christopher was very particular about not amending, not changing anything, just publishing what he had in front of him, you get the last coherent thought that Tolkien had. So
yeah, and like Christopher says in the foreword, it's good to keep in mind that this material was written like basically starting in 1917 through the end of Tolkien's life. And as Jude had said earlier, there's like 5 different versions of a lot of this stuff, right? But some of it there isn't. So some of it he just wrote once and kind of left it, and some of it he went back over and over again. And what Christopher says in the foreword of the Silmarillion, or at least the version that I was using, is that like, you can tell that some things are maybe like they don't fit as well. Like they weren't kind of revised as much as other things. So I'm not saying that this is one of them, but it just feels a bit like, yeah, he just kind of kicked the can and was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I have not read the histories of this portion of the Silmarillion as well as I have other things, but I would have to go look and see how many versions of this chapter there are. But I would imagine that there's at least 2 or 3. I don't even though it ends very abruptly, I would not imagine that this is one that he just did a one-off of.
Yeah. It's a cool chapter. I mean, that's the thing. This chapter is 7 pages long, like, right? 7 or 8 pages. And you get like the formation of the world, this night and day time, and then you get like the fate and free will and eternal life and death and everything shoved into like 7 pages. Man, that's
a heavy 7 pages.
Yeah. And I think that's why, and this is how it starts. So I think the Silmarillion is going to feel more fun as readers go forward, because this is just a super heavy, dense old chapter, but it gets more, and it's also like not that narratively driven, right? It's not like really a story. It really is, like Jude was saying, like a myth. So as you go on, you're going to get to more stories, and it's going to tease out and I think be a little bit lighter and easier and fun. This is a really tough chapter to start with, I think.
Okay, I'm relieved to hear that.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's the hardest chapter in the Silmarillion, but it's probably, I can only think of one that would be harder. So
yeah, it's a tough one. It's tough. Stupid Tolkien. Come on.
Well, I look forward to things theoretically going smoother from here on out. We'll see. Only time will tell, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Jude and Steph, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have anything that you want to share with the audience, and where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so you can find Athrabeth on wherever great podcasts are acquired. We are on Twitter at Athrabeth_cast. And you can find us at, is it Athrabeth? What's our website? I forgot. Oh, God.
Podcast.athrabeth.com.
Yeah. And you can find me if you're interested in me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at the North 4. And Jude is...
I'm on Twitter as Eremitic Jude.
Yeah. So come over, check out Athrabeth if you feel like going into any of this deep dive stuff.
Yep.
But I gotta say,
we have all kinds of weird episodes that you can dive into.
Yeah, you want to hear about like horses, or you want to hear about like elf souls? I don't know.
We've got you covered on all those weird topics. So
yeah.
That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. If you want to learn more about the network, go to WBNE.org, where you will find all of our shows like Perspective Z. The cover art is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/TolkienAboutPod. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod. You can follow me on Twitter at MCWhatsup and Instagram at MCTurndownForWhat. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod to explore the different tiers and perks that are available. You can become a sponsor of the podcast, like Johan. Johan, thank you so much for your continued support of the podcast. I so much appreciate it. As always, if you like what you're listening to, please make sure to rate and review on whatever platform you are listening.
But I have to say, this is such a great way of doing this, Mary Claire. What a great idea. Thank you so much for having us on. This has been amazing.
Yeah, this was a ton of fun.
Well, thank you both. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Have fun.
Yeah, it's okay if you can't pronounce anything. I would say, hey, give the audiobook a try if you don't, because then you don't have to sound out all those annoying names. And you can fall asleep if you want. It's fine. It's fine.
And that's what I'm talking about.